Hey everybody, welcome back to the Privacy Guy. I haven't done a live stream in a while, so I'm kind of excited to do this. The topics I'm going to cover in today's live stream are some private alternatives to large social media platforms, so alternatives to Facebook, alternatives to Instagram and Twitter, and other social media platforms that embrace privacy. I'm also going to be covering another topic that I've seen pointed out specifically on Reddit and Twitter a lot is an issue with DuckDuckGo that people run into. And then finally, I'm just going to answer some questions around internet privacy and respond to some questions that I see in the comments of my videos. I just want to address those questions and give you all some answers to whatever questions you may have. And also, if you're watching live, you can drop a question in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer those there. I'll try to keep an eye on those as we go here. So first up, just want to talk through privacy-friendly social media sites. I know there's been a lot of attention around alternative social media recently, mainly due to censorship. On the topic of censorship, people are navigating away from Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram towards sites that don't censor. So it's less of a privacy issue and it's more of a censorship thing. I think privacy-friendly social media sites that embrace privacy will definitely provide a better experience for users who are interested in privacy. So if you follow this channel, you know, some of the alternative social media sites could definitely be good for you. The one that was in the news recently was Parler. I know Parler was shut down because some hacker was able to turn off their servers, or Amazon did it. I'm not really sure. I haven't read too much about that, but I know that there are alternatives to Facebook that are more privacy friendly and will at least limit that social media platforms do. And that's one of the main issues that I see with social media is not necessarily like, you know, they're bad or dangerous, but just the fact that if I use Facebook, I'm just giving Facebook tons of my information and allowing them to kind of watch whatever I'm doing. And I'm not necessarily paranoid about that, but it's just kind of the reality that Facebook makes money on ads and they can charge more for ads when they're able to target me super specifically. So if they know, you know, what my interests are, they know where I live, they know how much money I make, they know how much money I spend. If Facebook knows all that stuff, that gives them the power to charge more for ads. And then down the road, it also gives them the ability to kind of exert an influence over, you know, the billions of users that it has. And I see that as a bigger issue, and not necessarily like me sharing photos on Facebook or sharing my thoughts. I don't have a privacy issue with that. The privacy issue is the data collection done by the platform itself. And I just don't think that an ad-supported platform like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, I don't think any of these sites are going to move away from an ad-supported model because they've, you know, optimized that to the millionth degree and are crushing it as far as their revenue goes. Advertising revenue for Facebook and Google were at all-time highs last year, and I see no reason why they would not be higher this year. But I know there are private alternatives out there, and I just want to kind of give you a look at what those look like. The first one is Minds. I've signed up for a Minds account, but I haven't used it. I think, I mean, Minds says it's the open source, which is great. It's privacy friendly. It is dedicated to being secure and safe. So I definitely appreciate that. The open source part is probably the most exciting. So since Minds is open source, I'm able to, you know, look at their source code and see what's happening when I'm using the service. So I know that if Minds is collecting my data, I can see that directly in the source code, and I'm able to check and verify that they're not doing that. So that's encouraging. Something like Facebook would never release its source code. They don't care if you can verify what's going on behind the scenes. Facebook is not interested in sharing any, proprietary software that they've paid to create. But Minds does that, and I think that's pretty impressive. And then second, Minds' second principle is that it embraces the First Amendment, and I don't know. I guess that's a good thing. I'm definitely a fan of free speech. I think if you're going to have something like the internet that's so valuable for sharing speech, I mean, you might as well allow people to say what they want on the platform. I think if you allow people to just kind of say whatever they want, I mean, at some point they'll have to learn to self-govern. People who say crazy offensive things will just not get the attention of people that share thoughtful and less harmful speech. So that's a good thing. I think I think Minds, their whole principle is based on free flowing information. The fact that it's private encourages that as well, because if people are concerned that someone's watching them or that someone is monitoring their behavior, they're going to be less likely to speak honestly on controversial topics. So I think a private search or private social media rather is a good thing. I think it's helpful, allow people to contribute to a conversation, even if they're not revealed. So I think Twitter has been a good place for that in the past, but as the site continues to censor different creators and different types of speech, I think we'll see a move towards something like Minds that embraces free and open conversation and doesn't try to implement censorship on its platform. Although some of the censorship that we've seen may be necessary to prevent certain damage or harm, but if we're going to be focusing on privacy, censorship is not going to get us anywhere. I want to point out a few other social media apps that are private. And basically by private, I don't really mean, I don't mean that they're not like encouraging sharing or allowing you to reveal your identity. I just mean they're going to be better than Facebook, really. Facebook and Google are two of the leading data collectors, quite honestly, because their business is advertising. So they want as much data about you as they can get. The next platform I want to talk about is called Diaspora. I've covered this a little bit before, but it's just a decentralized social media platform. And I think decentralized is kind of confusing because a lot of companies just kind of throw that word in their marketing materials to try to sound interesting and modern. But a decentralized social media platform would kind of put the power back in the hands of the users who are using the platform, rather than something like Facebook, where everybody that uses it is just kind of contributing into Facebook's bucket of data and allowing Facebook to monetize all that. So when you have a decentralized platform for social media, you're going to have all the users kind of controlling and contributing to the platform. So that has a few advantages. When it's decentralized, you're giving each user like control over maybe like the people they communicate with. So rather than having Facebook or Twitter decide, yeah, you can join our platform and communicate with these people, when it's decentralized, you're letting the user go, okay, I want to let these people into my group, my social circle, or whatever it is, and I don't want anybody else in. Whereas Facebook and Instagram, they want more people to join their platform. They want more people to have conversations and interact with each other. And that's not good for privacy. I mean, if you're just allowing strangers to view my profile and to get information about me against my wishes, obviously that's not a good thing for privacy. So I think decentralizing at least one social media platform, I mean, I think it would be a good thing. And I'm kind of excited to see what the future holds for alternatives to the major social media out there right now. So those are just a couple of the privacy-friendly social media services that I want to talk about. I know there's more out there. I've heard of Ello, which is kind of like a Tumblr-ish platform. It has a really clean interface and it's privacy-friendly, but I just don't find the community on there to really be relevant to the spheres that I want to discuss. It's more for artists and kind of visual content stuff. And then there's Vero. It was popular for a while. It was an app that a lot of people installed and then realized that once they installed it, you couldn't really delete your account. Vero made it very difficult to do that. So I don't know what the current state of Vero is, but I know it's still it's still active, and I'm sure it still has some users. There's probably some good conversations going on there. And then finally, there's Mastodon and Gab. And I think kind of the problem right now is that there aren't that many social media platform alternatives to Facebook and Google. Or Facebook and Twitter. So when people get kicked off of those platforms, they just all move over to places like Gab, Parler, and Mastodon. And so the conversations on there are kind of at the extremes. You have far left people, far right people who have been kicked off of other platforms using these services to, try to continue their conversations. And I haven't found the discussions to be very valuable. But I'm sure that as they gain more users, they'll kind of clean up their interfaces, allow for better, more productive conversations. And so we'll see what happens in the future with these alternatives to Facebook and other social media platforms. Okay, and then the second issue that I wanted to discuss, because one, I think it's kind of funny, and two, it's relevant to my channel, internet privacy in general, and specifically DuckDuckGo. And the issue I want to discuss is a problem that people will type in searches that are not, adult by nature, and the DuckDuckGo results will be porn sites. I think this is kind of a result of a lot of people using DuckDuckGo or possibly Bing or Yahoo for porn searches. I think some people probably think that if they just switch search engines when they're searching for adult terms, that they're better off because they're able to kind of separate that activity from their Google account or whatever. And that's kind of true. If you don't want Google collecting information about your adult searches, then yeah, using an alternative to Google is one way to avoid that. But people have posted on Reddit, people have posted on DuckDuckGo support forums that random searches will just be full of adult websites. And I think Google has solved this problem. I don't really see that issue when using Google. I certainly can search for most things I'm looking for and not come across adult websites, but DuckDuckGo hasn't figured this issue out yet, even though people have been posting and discussing about it for, at least months. I've seen it posted on Twitter and Reddit a lot. The most recent example I saw was on the DuckDuckGo Reddit. Someone searched for North Carolina sucks or something, and all the results were adult sites. I think this is a problem because it's going to drive users away from DuckDuckGo. And I think DuckDuckGo right now is the most accessible and kind of entry level into privacy search engines. I think DuckDuckGo is definitely the most modern feeling of the private search engines available, and the results are good in most cases. But if I hear about DuckDuckGo for the first time and I try it out, I'm going to be a little discouraged when I search for pictures of dogs and I'm getting adult content. I think it's an issue that DuckDuckGo needs to clean up. I've run into it with the safe search feature on and off. So I think their DuckDuckGo's filter just isn't clearing these out good enough. So yeah, I just think that's a step DuckDuckGo needs to take, is removing these unwanted and irrelevant adult websites from their search results. So we'll see what happens. Excuse me. We'll see what happens going forward, and hopefully DuckDuckGo can fix this, and we should see some more growth in DuckDuckGo once they clean that up. All right, so next up, I just want to kind of go through the comments I see on my page and answer any questions that you guys might have. So if you guys are watching right now and you have any questions regarding internet privacy, I'd love to answer those. I'm just going to kind of work my way through the comments in no specific order, and we'll be happy to take any questions from you as I see them. So the first comment I see is about Parler. They're just asking what happened. I haven't reviewed this very much, but the first news I heard was that Amazon took Parler offline. They just disabled their hosting. And then I've seen other news about hackers just breaking into Parler's code and breaking it. They just broke the site. So I really don't know what happened. I'm assuming that, Parler will figure that out and figure out either if they have to spin up a new domain or whatever, they'll figure it out and the site will be back live shortly if it's not already. And then the next question I had was in regards to my video about de-Googled phones. I think de-Googled phones are important, specifically because if I have my laptop, I don't have to install Google Apps or even allow Google to track me or follow me or whatever. Like I have the power to turn that stuff off. And unfortunately, with platforms like Android, there's a lot of Google functionality just kind of built in. So location tracking, you have to log in with a Google account to even turn on the phone in some cases. So I have a problem with that, and I think Google phones are a good alternative. I've talked about iOS in the past and how it's better than Android probably just because it's not owned by Google, but it still has its own privacy issues. So I talked about some alternatives that were de-Googled, which just means that the phones don't use Google's services. They don't connect to Google Apps, and in most cases, they'll just block any software or internet requests that come from Google. And the question that I saw was like, a privacy-friendly phone just doesn't do anything, and like using it is pointless because it's constantly connected to the internet, and it's just a way to track you. And I agree. Phones, kind of by nature, are connected to the internet, connected to cellular towers and all that stuff. So yes, they are a way to locate you or track you. But if you're using a phone, as most people do, you're obviously going to be much better off with something that is de-Googled. So you're not giving your location data, your app usage, and all that stuff to Google, because that just makes Google more powerful and obviously puts the information that Google collects at risk, because Google is just storing that somewhere in a server. And if that server is hacked or somebody at Google is able to access that, obviously you're kind of screwed. So the point of my de-Googled phone video was not to say that a phone that doesn't use Google is somehow like the ultimate privacy tool. I just thought that in order for people to, one, use a smartphone, because that's kind of an essential for a lot of people. So people to use a smartphone, and for people to have the ability to take devices on the go that aren't necessarily going to track them and send their information to a private party. So that was that on the de-Googled phone topic. And then I had a question about blockchain social media. I was discussing certain privacy trends that I thought were going to be big in 2021. And I mentioned that privacy-friendly social media or alternatives to the mainstream social media sites were probably going to pop up in 2021. And if they didn't, start in 2021, they would probably gain popularity. I think blockchain social media could definitely play a part in this. I think the blockchain's great for, storing information and doing so in a way that doesn't put the burden on one company to protect their users' information. I think the blockchain does have some issues in that it's basically just a log of transactions. So it's not like it's the ultimate privacy tool, because if I want to store something or send something to someone else, that's going to be recorded in the blockchain. So even though it's decentralized and it's not under control of one company, it's still a record and still recording history and activity that I personally may not want to be tracked and stored. And then I made a video about Bitcoin because obviously Bitcoin is blowing up. It was up to over 40,000 the other day. I'm not sure what it's at now, but I just saw Bitcoin like kind of become relevant again, even though I hadn't seen it talked about since probably 2019. Bitcoin blew up, and Bitcoin kind of runs into the same issue with the blockchain as blockchain social media sites would. Bitcoin's great. It's probably less tracked than something like your credit card when you spend it. But once again, since it relies on the blockchain, all my transactions are going to be stored in the blockchain and recorded and are basically public for anyone to access. And I think Bitcoin's great, but I think saying it's the solution to tracking financial transactions is just not the case. Simply because it relies on the blockchain and keeps a record of everything, your purchases can be linked back somewhere and tracked somewhere. So that's just one thing to think about. And I wanted people to be aware of that, so that they didn't get on to Coinbase or some app and buy a bunch of Bitcoin and think that they could spend it on whatever they want, and nobody would have any idea of what happened or what they spent it on. Let's see. Next up is a question. Someone said, does Quant censor news? My answer to that is probably not. The case with most private search engines is that they get their results from somewhere else. That's called a meta search engine. Most private search engines get their results from Bing or Yahoo. Startpage gets theirs from Google. So basically, any censorship that these platforms would be doing, would apply to the private versions as well. I think search engines don't censor content on purpose. I think it just so happens that if I search for a lot of one type of news, I'm not going to see the other type as often, just because, Google, for example, is able to see all of my search history and knows that I've clicked on Fox News sites, for example, and not CNN or, whatever. They have an idea of what I prefer as far as news goes, and they're able to kind of make decisions about what I'm most likely looking for and what I'm most likely to click on. The benefit to using private search engines as far as this kind of censorship goes, which is known as a filter bubble, the benefit to private search engines is that they're unable to create a data profile about you that says, oh, this user is looking for conservative news sites, or this user is looking for left-leaning news sites. Privacy search engines can't do that because, one, they shouldn't be tracking you. If they're a private search engine, they don't. And so they're unable to get access to all of your search history, and they can't link it back to a profile like your Gmail account, like Google can. So DuckDuckGo, Start Page, and Quant, for example, are definitely not going to censor the news you see in ways that Google does, because they're unable to build a filter bubble and kind of trap you in that information isolation of just seeing news and content that you're likely to agree with. So that's private search engines and censorship. I had some questions on my video about password management tools. People were asking specifically for recommendations. People asked about Bitwarden, people asked about KeePass, Lastpass, all of those. I recommend KeePass. I've used KeePass for a number of years, and it releases updates often. The interface really hasn't changed much. And I should mention that I'm using KeePass X. There are a few different versions of KeePass out there. I know that KeePass X is open source, which I prefer from a security and privacy standpoint, because I can verify that they're not sending my password somewhere. Just verification of the functionality of the app is very important. I love KeePass. You're able to store your passwords directly on your computer, which is important. You can kind of save a KeePass file and upload that to KeePass. It's password protected. It's encrypted. It's a strong password privacy tool, password management tool. It's not going to communicate with the cloud and get your passwords leaked on the internet, like many other password management tools do. It's not in your browser. And then next up, Lastpass. Lastpass is probably one of the more well-known password management tools. My personal opinion is that Lastpass is terrible. I've used it at work mostly, and I just find the interface kind of confusing, and it's awkward if you're using something like Mac's Keychain to store your passwords, or Chrome's built-in password manager, just because it kind of conflicts with that, and then it is confusing whether you want to store your password in Keychain or KeePass or it's just confusing. So I wouldn't recommend LastPass. I know Bitwarden is popular. I know 1Password is popular. So I would just try out a few. Look for one that's open source. Look for one that's doesn't rely on the cloud to store your passwords, and hopefully you'll have a good experience with whatever password manager you use. And then I just wanted to comment on my video about how to protect your privacy in 2020. Many of those same tactics for protecting your privacy still apply in 2021. Nothing changed besides the year. But I did talk about messaging apps a little bit. I would just say that Signal is still the gold standard as far as private and encrypted messaging apps go. I think you'll have the best experience with Signal. I think as far as privacy goes, Signal is top notch. Things like Telegram and WhatsApp have just kind of continued to have privacy and security issues. So I just simply can't recommend those. I know I've used them in the past, but I think Signal is looking good going forward and has a demonstrated track record of solid privacy practices. So definitely recommend that. I've seen this is kind of not a comment, but just kind of a general theme that I've noticed in the comments is talking about private search engines. I think there's some confusion around what it really means to use a private search engine as far as how the site can protect your privacy. So basically, all private search engines can protect you from is the tracking of your searches. So if you use DuckDuckGo, if you use Start Page, if you use Quant, your searches aren't going to Google. They're not stored in the site's database. They're not linked with your email account. So you're not creating a profile about yourself on a company's server that could potentially be hacked or leaked or whatever. Once you type in a search query and click on a link in the results, you're going to be taken to a different site. And obviously, the search engine can no longer protect your privacy once you've left the site. So that's something that people get confused about. It's like, well, I use DuckDuckGo, so how would you know what website I went to? Well, yeah, I wouldn't know what website can track you however it wants to. I just recommend only using HTTPS versions of websites you visit, and you can do that with the tool like HTTPS Everywhere, and that just enables the encrypted version of a website if it's available. Some sites just don't have SSL certificates, don't have encryption set up, and for those, most browsers are going to display a warning message, and I would just try to avoid those sites, and specifically don't type information into those sites like your email address or your password or any of that stuff, because if it's not encrypted, then pretty much anybody can view that who's on your network and monitoring kind of what you've done. Let's see. Finally, I just want to discuss people have responded to my videos about DuckDuckGo in this way, just saying that, yeah, DuckDuckGo is great, but Google's better. So I'm just going to continue to use Google. That's fine. If you want to make that decision, go for it. But I personally just have to recommend something like DuckDuckGo or Start Page. I think it's maybe not even an issue right now. It probably won't be an issue until it's too late to kind of say, wait, I don't want that to happen. But yeah, so people say that Google's results are better, and simply the only reason they're better is because Google's able to build a data profile about you that they're then able to tailor those results to your past behavior. So I kind of discussed this earlier in the stream, but just knowing that Google is kind of changing the content that you see based on what it thinks you're interested in, I just don't see that providing much value to the user, because yeah, I know what I've read in the past. I'm looking for information that will complement that or contradict that or whatever. I just want a complete view of the information available on the internet. And if Google's going to, track you and create a person, a digital person that it kind of thinks you are, you're not going to get the full representation of information about a given topic, because Google's only going to show you what it thinks you're interested in. So yeah, that's an issue. Maybe some private search engines, the results are 5% worse. But I think as far as privacy goes, it's important. And in the long run, using a private search engine, it is just kind of helping decentralize the internet in a way, because otherwise you're just contributing to Google. You're just giving Google more power to collect as much information about you as possible. I see a comment about DuckDuckGo working in French. Yeah, I think DuckDuckGo is available in most languages. Again, I will note that DuckDuckGo doesn't necessarily use its own search results. It often relies on things like Bing and Yahoo to source results from. So obviously Bing and Yahoo work in different languages, so DuckDuckGo will as well. So that's one thing to know if you're looking for a private search engine and don't know if it'll support your language or not. Most will. Otherwise, I know that Quant is a French search engine and it has a French version. So that's another option if DuckDuckGo suddenly stops working in French. But yeah, I think that's all I have for today. I appreciate you guys tuning into the stream. I'd really appreciate you subscribing if you're not already. But yeah, I'll probably be doing these streams more often in the coming months for 2021. And so I'll be covering just kind of general privacy related news, maybe new privacy tools that I'm learning about, and just kind of updates to videos that I've made in the past. So yep, appreciate you guys tuning in. Let me know if you guys have any more questions and I'll be happy to answer them. Thanks for watching. See you guys.